Hello! Today I'm going to show you how you can make the boomerang for Gnar using foam. And we also show how you can make it so you can take it apart and easily put it somewhere in storage, in your closet, in your bag, doesn't matter. And it's also a convention safe prop because it's foam, so it's sort of soft. So it's safe to bring to a convention. If you want to see how to make this, then keep watching this video and don't forget to like and subscribe so you will never miss another video. And without further ado, let's get into the video. To make life easier, you can actually download the patterns for this prop and also for some other accessories of the costume from my website. I will link it in the description below so you can find it easily. I started by drafting a pattern. Of course, if you download my pattern, you will get a much nicer looking one. This is just the one that I drew. Here you can see the space that I left open for the PVC pipe, because this will make it magical so you can take it apart. But you don't have to do this. If you don't want to do this, you can just make the whole piece out of one piece. Since I'm using 5mm thick EVA foam and my prop needs to be thicker, I need to build it up from layers. To make this possible, I actually traced my pattern and cut it into pieces, so I can cut these pieces out of the foam and then stack it. I try to position my pattern on the foam so I can use as little foam as possible, because of course I don't want to use as much material and I don't want to produce a lot of waste. So I'm just going to position them so they're most economical. Then I'll trace the patterns with a ballpoint because it's easy to see on this light colored foam. If you have dark foam, you can also use a white paint marker or metallic markers to trace the foam. Otherwise you couldn't see where you have to cut. And I just repeat this a lot of times. When all the pieces are drawn on the foam, I'm going to take out a knife. Here I'm just using a simple knife and also a knife sharpener, because it's really important that you use a sharp knife. So during the cutting of foam, I keep sharpening my knife every now and then. So you really need a sharpener. But you can also use actually sanding paper to sharpen your knife. The foam that I'm using here is the high density EVA foam from a shop from the Netherlands called Mink. They also have low density foam, and that's also really nice, but for this prop I wanted to use the high density foam because it's harder, so the prop will also be more sturdy. But of course it's also more difficult to cut, so that means you will have to sharpen the knife more often during the cutting of the foam. Look, there we have a piece. And I just keep cutting it out until I have the whole shape. It doesn't really matter which knife you're using as long as it's sharp. So you can use a simple knife like this, or a craft knife, or a box cutter. Just be sure that you keep sharpening it. So this is all the pieces that will shape the layers of my prop. And as you can see, I also cut some half ones, but it doesn't matter because when I glue them together, you won't see it anymore. And these are the pieces for the base shape. And as you can see, there is a hole in them, which actually has space for the connector for the PVC pipe. Look, it fits exactly. And the top on top. Okay, so these are the shapes, and in between for the handle is a little PVC pipe. It fits exactly. Now it's time to glue the foam. And for the gluing, I'm using contact glue Duracol from also Mink, so the same shop that sells the foam. It comes in cans and it actually dries out pretty quickly. So what I do to prevent it from drying out so I don't have to throw it away, I will open the can with my screwdriver, and then I will stir the glue, because you really want it to be stirred well so everything is mixed together. Then the glue will actually work its best. I'm actually reusing a little spoon from a yogurt cup, because reusing things is better than throwing them away, right? And then I'm taking a plastic squeeze bottle that you can also use for poffertjes. Who knows what poffertjes are? Let me know in the comments. It's very Dutch and very delicious. But now we're using it for glue. So I'm just putting the glue inside that I will need for this project. And actually the rule of thumb is put as much glue inside that you will use up in the next 2 days, because that's how long the glue will stay wet and good in the bottle so it doesn't dry out. And that makes you have to throw away less glue, so less waste is better for the environment. And now important with this glue is that you put it on both halves that you want to glue together. So I'm taking the squeeze bottle and I'm just squeezing the glue out onto one of the pieces that I want to glue. And then to smooth it out, I use a little scrap of foam, but I actually forgot to film it. Then the glue needs to dry for about 5 minutes, but it can really depend on your climate. In my climate it needs about 5 minutes to dry before you can put the pieces together, but it's also possible that it dries quicker where you are, or maybe even slower. You just have to find it out. And you know when it's right, when it's not wet anymore, but a little bit tacky. You can feel it. Then put the 2 pieces together. Make sure that you put them on the right spot, because once this glue is glued, it is glued and you won't get it apart anymore. And then press it together, and carefully also press the edges together because you don't want openings. And then we continue because we need to stack this whole piece up until it's thick enough to be the prop. So I'm just continuing this process until it's fully glued down. And here you can see that I also put the PVC pipe connector inside. And I also put some contact glue on the PVC pipe to really stick it into the foam. And now it doesn't go anywhere anymore. Oh, this one still needs a layer. Press it. Yeah. Now let's work on the handle. So I cut out a rectangle of foam and I'm heating it up so it will get a little bit soft, so it's easier to wrap around the PVC pipe. As you can see, it's now easier to shape. I'm checking how long it should be to cover the PVC pipe fully, and then I will cut it at that length. Then I put contact cement on the foam and on the PVC pipe, and when the contact cement is dry, I will put the both things together. And as you can see, I actually cut the foam too short. This happens to me a lot of times. I wonder if this happens to you too, because it's just when you wrap it around and you cut it off, you think that it's right, and then you're going to glue it and it was not enough. But luckily there's always scraps of foam coming to the rescue. Then, after all the layers that we stuck together are now completely dry, well, when the glue is dry, then I can carve the base shape into it, because we will need to sand this later, but sanding really gives a lot of dust and it's really nasty and just very messy. So when you carve the base shape, as much as you can, you reduce the foam dust that you will have to blow everywhere later. So I'm just using the same knife that I used to cut out the pieces of foam to now shape it roughly. Of course, I'll have to do the same for the bigger piece of the prop. So I'm just using the same knife, but I sharpen it a lot because this really makes the knife blunt very, very quickly. Here I'm sharpening it, but of course off the window so you can't see it. And then I'll just keep carving it. And this is just a little bit how you feel it, so it doesn't have a lot of rules. You just carve and see how it looks and carve a little bit more. That's how it works. Just wing it. Okay, now it's time for sanding. I'm using a Dremel and I'm using sanding bits on it. A finer one and a rougher one. And this is Dremel that I use. I bought it in a local hardware store, but I will link one on Amazon for you so everyone can find one. Of course I use safety glasses because I don't want the dust in my eyes, and I also wear a mask, but it's not on camera. Then I put on the Dremel and I will sand away the rough shape. Well, I sand the rough shape into it. So first I'm using a sanding bit with a rough grit. So it's 60 grit for the sanding paper, and that actually means that it will take away quite a bit of the foam while using it with the Dremel. But still, because it's high density foam, it won't take away a lot. So for this it's actually really easy to use because you don't make mistakes that easily. With low density EVAFOAM, the foam is much softer and you cut away a lot of foam really easily. So that's how you make battle damage without even wanting to make battle damage. But here, as you can see, it really smooths out the blade cuts that are very rough. I mostly do this work outside if the weather allows it, but you can also do it inside. But then I really advise that you of course wear all the protective items and also use a vacuum cleaner so you can suck away a lot of the dust particles immediately, and of course open your windows. I also mostly like to wear gloves, but in this case I was out of gloves. And then I put the other sanding drum on the Dremel. This one has a finer grit. It's 120 grit sanding paper, so it gives a lot smoother work. So this is how I smooth down the rougher sanding that I did with the 60 grit sanding paper drum. This will make the surface a lot smoother and it will really help to make it look more natural. Of course, this prop needs to look like a bone, so it's an organic shape, so it doesn't need to be very straight and very perfect, so that makes it a little bit easier, of course. So just keep sanding and keep sanding until you whoa! Wow! Okay, we're back inside and we put the camera on its feet again. And here you see the result of the sanding. I also sanded some battle damage into it to make it look even more badass. And now to smooth out the last little details, I'm going to heat it up with my heat gun. That's the tool that I also use for my Warbler work. By applying heat to the foam, you will blow away or melt away the last little bits of foam dust. And also the pores of the foam will close, so it will be easier to paint later and it will just give you a much smoother result. I also bought this tool in a hardware store, but you can also find it on Amazon, so I will try to put a link in the description so you can find one. I mostly put mine on 330 degrees Celsius. That's a really good temperature for Worbla, and also for heating foam it's also good. Just make sure that you're careful and don't burn yourself, and also use something to protect your table. For example, I'm using a silicone baking mat that you can actually also get at Amazon if you want. And also be careful not to burn and warp the PVC pipe, because that's actually very prone to melting. Alright, let's take out the foam clay. This is a very fun product to use. It's actually foam, but it's clay. I'm using the foam clay from Mink, so that's the Dutch cosplay store, but you can get it at different stores as well. And every foam clay is a little bit different. From texture wise. This one is a little bit hard and a little bit dry, but you also have softer and stickier foam clays. But I really like this one, and I can also sculpt in some water to make it more sticky and more wet if I want it. So I'm just sculpting the shape of the claws that I want on the prop. And I'm just using my fingers for this, it's really easy. And it's also super lightweight, it's just really awesome stuff. And then I just put a little bit of water on the foam clay so it will stick to my foam prop. Then I shape it further until I like how it looks. And you actually, with foam clay, you have to know that it will dry a little bit different than how you sculpted it. Some foam clay will expand a little bit, so it will be more round, and some foam clay will shrink a little bit. So the shapes won't stay exactly the same. But for this prop that's no problem at all, because it's an organic shape, so it doesn't really matter a lot. And of course I replicate the process for all the other claws, so I end up with 4 claws on the prop. Now it needs to dry before I can paint it. Mostly 2 days is enough for foam clay, but I mostly put it aside for a week, so I know it's actually really dry before I start painting it. For the priming of the prop, I'm using Quick Spray Primer. It's a flexible spray primer in the color black from also the shop Mink. It's very similar to Plastidip, which you maybe already knew. But of course you can also use a brush-on primer like Hexflex Flexible Primer, or even PVA Primer or Wood Glue, which also give a really nice effect. And then we're going to paint it. After the primer is dry, we have a really nice black underground color that already serves as some shadows. And for the actual color of the bone, I'm using some Citadel paints. That's actually meant to paint little miniature Warhammer knights. Citadel Paints has a really nice collection of colors, and also this bone color, which is just really nice for props like this, and also for little bones like you see on the left here. I actually also filmed a video about how I made those bones, so if you subscribe to the channel, you will actually also see that video that I will upload in the next week. For painting my cosplays and my props, I really like to use makeup brushes. Makeup brushes are very ergonomic to handle because they have a short and a little bit thicker handle, and they also come in different shapes, so some are really nice for dry brushing and some are really nice for painting small lines. And they're also not really expensive if you just buy them at like the Kruidvat, for example. And this is a little skull that I made also from foam clay that's going on the skirt. And this is a skull from thermoplastic that's going on my wig. All painted with the same paint. I needed to add some shadow colors to where I'm going to put the leather bands. This is actually fake leather. So I just stick it on with a little bit of tape, so I know where they will be later. I will glue them on with hot glue later, but now I know where to paint my shadows. For the shadows I'm using some oil paint, in a black color. The brand is Winsor & Newton, and it's a really nice quality because I have this tube for over 10 years and it's still really good. So I'm using another makeup brush now for the shadows, and because the oil paint is so slowly drying, it's really easy to paint nice shadows with it and blend it out really smoothly. I also glued some fake leather to the handle and the prop was finished. I made a little strap so I could connect the prop to my corset when wearing the costume. This is really handy and also it looks pretty cool. The little cute tiny bones that are in my wig and also on my skirt will be the subject of next week's video, where I will show some thermoplastic crafting for you. So now you have seen how I made this prop for my Gnar cosplay. I hope you liked it and maybe you got some inspiration to make a prop for yourself. So do you already have ideas? Do you want to make a prop with foam, or do you want to make a prop with Worbla? I also have videos about making props with Worbla, so I will link some so you can get some inspiration. Yeah, let me know if it brought you to some ideas and if you're gonna make something. So thank you so much for watching and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye!